Welcome to Cryptid Wilderness Research. My name is Daniel Becker in Anchorage, Alaska. Joining me are my fellow co-hosts, first in Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater.
Hello.
Also joining us, as I always say, a man who needs no introduction anywhere in the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska. He doesn't make an appointment with the mayor. The mayor makes an appointment with him, Paul Ayat.
Hello.
And joining us tonight is our research partner in Arkansas, a man that not only a great gentleman, but a fantastic researcher, a man that I consider one of the generals in the field of the Bigfoot research community, Stephen Hill. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me tonight.
So, Stephen, having been in the field with you and done research with you with William, one of the things that I've always wondered and didn't get a chance to ask you in the times we've been out is, how did you get started in all this? What started you down that journey of cryptid research?
For me, I always had an interest in the subject, and I think it was probably Monster Quest that probably piqued my interest early on. And it's around 2008. It is in the spring of 2008. My oldest daughter actually had a sighting from the house that we were living in town. She was looking through the blinds in her bedroom window one night. She was, I think she was about 13, about to turn 14. And she was looking through the blinds into the neighbor's yard, and she could see this tall figure walking along the edge of the tree line in the neighbor's yard. And she said that it came up to the mailbox and it stopped. And the mailbox only came up to about its waist.
Wow.
It paused for a little bit, and then it turned around and it went back the same way that it came out. And of course, she came to the bedroom, got me, and told me, Dad, come look at what's here. And of course, by the time I got there, I mean, it was already gone. And so, I mean, we had that, and I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And it was in I've always believed it was probably January of 2009 that I actually had a sighting. The reason why I say January is because I know that it was still getting dark really early in the evening time, in the 5 o'clock hour. And it was probably about getting dusky dark. And I leaving the job, and I came down this road and had a real sharp turn at the bottom of the hill, sharp right-hand turn. So I wasn't going very fast down the hill. And whenever I made the turn, I could see something moving through the trees. And I thought, man, what is that? And it just kept coming. And I never stopped. I was probably going probably 15 miles an hour. You know, I wasn't going very fast at all. And I could see this thing. It came out of the tree line. It crossed the road. And it went up a hill on the other side. And I was thinking that whenever I get up there to where it was at, because it was within 100 yards, and I was steadily closing the distance. So it was probably 80 to 100 yards away when it crossed the road in front of me. But I was younger then. My eyes were pretty good. And there were things that I remembered about it, and I was thinking, I was trying to convince myself, you know, that this was a bear sighting. But there were things that just didn't add up in my mind for that to be a bear. One thing, it didn't have a muzzle on it. It had a face more like ours, with no snout. Wow. And the thing was incredibly fast and very, very smooth. This thing, it moved very fluid. It didn't have a motion like a bear when it ran. It didn't move like a deer. I mean, this was smooth and super fast. So I immediately had an argument in my mind that this was a bear, and I was thinking, no, this didn't move right for a bear. So that right there was what got me going. And I went back and forth in my mind for years after that. I finally, around 2011, I finally came around a little bit more to thinking, well, it probably was a Bigfoot that I saw. But it was a long time coming before I finally came around and accepted this as whole truth. And what really put me over the top, even though from the time that I'd had a sighting in 2009 till I had a second sighting in 2017, the one I saw in 2017, that was it. That was information overload when I saw that one. It was that one caused me to lose some sleep for a few months. I would have trouble sleeping at night. I didn't have anybody to talk to, tell anybody about it, and I didn't tell anybody that I'd seen the second one for at least 3 months before I even told my wife.
Wow.
It had that kind of effect on me. The second one did. So that was kind of my story that kind of got me into it. But in between that time, you know, I'd had encounters. I'd heard vocals. I'd heard the heaviest footsteps I've ever heard in my life. So imagine a 1,500-pound cow walking upright, taking steps on crunchy leaves. That's what I heard. And for whatever reason, I still don't know why I did it. I grunted at it, and the footsteps stopped. That's pretty wild. So, yeah, that was kind of my introduction to it, you know. And of course, it was in August of 2015 that I quit doing calls, because prior to that, I would go out and I'd do some vocalizations, and I had something answer me way too close one morning in August of 2015. It was.
So you mentioned you actually got a look at some of the facial features, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't remember them real great, but yeah.
Sure. Can you describe for us again what you observed with the facial things?
I can't tell you a whole lot about it, because what I remember the most about the head and the face, it never looked toward me when it crossed that road. It looked straight ahead. It never turned its head, anything. So I can just tell you that it was basically a face similar to ours, in that more of what it didn't have than what it did have. I guess, if that would make more sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, what an encounter! And I can definitely see how that would get you on the trail.
Yeah. And it was you know, part of what kind of swayed me, you know, back then around 2011. You know, that's when the DNA study came out. So that kind of made me gave me a little more confidence in thinking that, yeah, these things they're probably real. That might have been what I saw. So
yeah.
But, since then, you know, of course, whenever you have something like that happen, you'll replay that, no telling how many times in your mind. You running through the whole scene all over again. And I mean, this was probably 3 to 5 seconds, the amount of time that I saw it, and it probably covered 100 yards, 80 to 100 yards in those 5 seconds. That's how fast it was moving. So
Fast and smooth.
And it was on all fours.
All fours.
No tail.
No tail.
And I'm not going to say that the rear end was the exact same height as the front end, but it was real close in height. And the top of its back probably would have been about the height of the top of the picnic table, as far as height. So it wasn't just a real big one either. So.
Yeah.
So you grew up in that area, correct?
Yes.
So when you were growing up, did you hear stories from others about Sasquatch, the fog monster, cryptids? Was that part of that region that you grew up in?
Yeah, well, everybody in this area has heard of the Falcon Monster. And of course, people from all over the world have heard about the Falcon Monster. And I never was one way or the other on the Falcon Monster. You know, it was the story that we'd always heard about. And occasionally there would be somebody who had seen it cross Highway 71 south in between Falcon and Doddridge. And sometimes our local news comes out of Shreveport, Louisiana, and they would send somebody out, you know, to do the interview on whoever had seen what they saw across Highway 71. And I remember a few of those interviews, and the reporter, you know, they never were real enthused about the fact that they were interviewing somebody who claimed to have seen the Falcon Monster. But there were times that you could tell the person who was being interviewed was still excited, still pretty shook up about what they had seen, even though it had been maybe an hour or 2 hours or longer since they'd had the sighting. You could still tell by their reactions on the camera that they were still shook up over seeing it. And that was a thing that always stuck out in my mind. And there were a few times that I had worked in the Falk area, but I'd always looked, but I'd never seen anything. So, you know, I never could say yay or nay on it. Just what I had seen and what I had heard.
So let's turn it over to Matt Slater down in Quincy, Washington. Matt, what you got?
These two sightings got you into it. Your focus in your current research is audio, and so had you been doing a lot of vocalizations and calls yourself? You mentioned that you stopped doing that. Is that just something that you just kind of did when you were out there after you had your first sighting, just to maybe try and draw them in, rile them up a little bit?
Yeah, I was. The other thing is I'd started watching, you know, the Finding Bigfoot, which probably, you know, a lot of people, you know, they poke some fun at the Finding Bigfoot folks, and but it probably got a lot more people talking about the subject and more willing to talk about it than prior to that, because around here locally, I had some guys that would tell me about some things, and they'd always described it, you know, as say some kind of a big cat would move through. And, you know, they talk about, well, whenever these big cats will move through, the horses will get real still, real quiet. They won't make any noise, things like that. And I'd had some people tell me, you know, they'd heard these screams. Well, I've heard some screams since then, you know, and I wish some of those guys were around so I could ask them a few more questions. But as far as the people in the area, they really didn't talk about the subject that much. There's one man who lived here. I was one of his grandsons. I was probably best friends with him, you know, when we were kids. And I had never heard the story told until, probably about 7 years ago. And it happened just a few miles from where I live at here. And what it was he was a logger, and he had is early one morning, and he cut a tree down. And whenever he raised up from cutting this tree down, when he raised up, he could see a Bigfoot looking at him. Mm-hmm. And he was about 6 foot tall, and he guessed the Bigfoot was probably about 6.5 feet tall. And they had a stare down. He said it had black wavy hair from his head to his feet. Is how he described it.
Wow.
And they stared at each other. He never turned his saw off. And somebody asked him, said, "What were you going to do if that thing came at you?" He said, "I was going to stick him with the saw."
Yeah.
But the Bigfoot finally turned around and left him alone. You know, and he told a few people about that, and people got to making fun of him, and he quit telling the story. You know. Mm-hmm. Which was a sad thing. But yeah, as far as the audio, you know, I do some audio. I probably don't. I've slacked up on a bunch of stuff, just to be honest about it. You know, work and other stuff. It's kind of got in the way of it. But yeah, with the audio, the only bad thing for me about the audio, if I'm going to put an audio recorder out for 8 hours or 10 hours, I'm going to listen to every second of it. Because you could run it on some kind of a computer program, and you may miss some things. You know, it's quite possible to miss it. Of course, the audio that I captured in the area where we took you, where you got to see your first rattlesnake, Daniel. That
yes,
dark
woods.
The dark woods. You know. There was some logging activity going on in the area, and I kept thinking, you know, I probably ought to put an audio recorder out down there and see see what happens whenever some of this equipment cranks up really early in the morning, hours before daylight, and see what goes on. And sure enough, it was around that time. It was probably around 4 o'clock in the morning whenever I finally captured the good audio that I got out of the area. So 2 of the best tree knocks I've ever recorded. I mean, it's just but that's the bad thing about it. And I hate to say it, but you know how William and I are at keeping things in order. It's we're kind of chaotic with it. Sometimes we remember where things are at, and sometimes we don't. And that's how I am with some of the audio that I've got. But yeah, the audio is really interesting, and we've got a few people we can send some things to, and they can put it on the spectrogram, and they can kind of give us an idea of what range it comes in and how many hertz. And some of comes in the right range. Even the whistles that I recorded a few years ago came in.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much all I want to say is just those whistles, they came in a range that was like 700-800 hertz. And you could hear the hertz.
You are really the one who introduced me to the audio section of research, and that speaks volumes about the quality of researcher that you are, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication to go through all those hours of audio recordings to maybe hear 2 seconds of cryptid responses. That takes a lot of dedication, and that's fantastic that you've done that. And I think that the audio portion of research is one that's often overlooked. People are looking for those camera shots, etc. But it's next level. It's the next level of dedication to be an audio researcher. So I think you've done a fantastic job in that area. Let's go to Mr. Ayat, my counterpart, also in Anchorage, Alaska. What you got, man?
I was thinking, like you said, you grew up in the area, which you must. You were talking about knowing a lot of people that have encountered or heard sounds or whatever, and I think that's important. There's a lot of people kind of clam up when outsiders come in. You know what I mean? And then that way, if a guy is local, they say, "Hey, come over here. Look what I got." You know what I mean? If we had a show, we did a show 4 or 5 shows back about who would we contact? And this is a question for you, of course. Who would we contact if we had to kill a Bigfoot? Unfortunately, if we did, who would we contact? Who would be the right? So, would you go locally as far as because I mean, heaven forbid it happened, but it's a big predator. You never know.
Right.
You might have to protect yourself. But did you just contact the news? I mean, where would the guys start from there?
Yeah, for me, that's a really good question for me, because I don't know. There's some people that I thought probably could have been trusted with it, and anymore, I'm not sure if the people that I thought I probably would have tried to reach out to would be the same people I would reach out to now. For me, if that happens, say if something got killed if one got killed on the highway, which would probably be, that's always possible. There are those stories out there where that happens. And I don't know. I'd probably go with people. I'd probably try to find at least somebody who's not into the subject to try to trust some of that information. So that way, if I did go public with it later on, and say some weird things happened, I'd have, that would be my safety net.
There you go. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. There bound to be some people to reach out to. We know people in the community that they could probably lead us in a good direction. So. But yeah, something like that. I don't know. You'd have to. Yeah, that's a really good question, because right off the top of my head, I don't know for sure who I would go to.
Yeah, it's a rough one up here because we don't have any elected like sheriffs. Up here we have a trooper department and a local police department. So there's no trusted official that was voted in that we could trust. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just appointed, so to speak. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it.
So let's talk about one of your research areas. So you and William have nicknamed this area Ground Zero. And I've had the privilege of being there with you guys several times, and it's just an amazing area. And I can say, I'm speaking from my own experience, as soon as you go in there, you feel that area is just charged. I get that there's no other term I can use to really describe it. And on previous podcasts, I've also referred to that area as the Amazon of America, because the woods are so thick, you literally can step into them and vanish. And you guys have termed it Ground Zero. But tell us a little bit about the uniqueness of the research area.
Yeah, it's actually public land. We don't own it, but with that area, it's the reason why we call it Ground Zero is because the first time that William and I got together in this area, we came out with the eye shine video, which was, I know William has talked about that before, and how my daughter and one of her friends were with us that night. My father-in-law, my wife had to take her mom down there to the hospital because my father-in-law, he was having a bad night. And so I had to bring the girls back, and William had done some calls, and we got a return call, and I knew the area where the call came from. And so when we came back, we went to that area, and sure enough, that's where the eye shine was, where the call came from. And it's I've actually had it up on my YouTube channel for a few years. You go look at it. We've got some screen captures out of it. It'd be interesting for somebody to do that on the computer and see what else they might pull out of it. And that was pretty wild, because they stayed out there in that one spot. Originally, we saw 3 sets of eyes, and one set of eyes disappeared. You can see them blink. And I'd showed that to some other researchers, and their first reaction, was probably an owl. But then I told them how far away it was, and they were like, yeah, okay, it's probably not an owl, because it was about 200 yards. That happened on a Friday night. And for whatever reason, it was on the Sunday before I was able to go back out there to step off how far it was. And it was, it was a little over somewhere between 200 and 220 yards. And on that Sunday, I had found a 3-toed track in that area. So, I mean, that fit right in. And the picture that I have there on the door, that's what we believe is the mama carrying the baby. That came from the same area. That came from the spot where this picture is later on, but it was just about in that same spot where I found that 3-toed track on that Sunday after we'd seen the eye shine in the video. And the eyes changed colors. Of course, William was doing a cat call when the eyes changed colors. So I'm thinking that was probably not a good call. But, that's pretty crazy. The first time we get together and we come out with something that we can show people.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So I noticed that when we meaning me, you, and William, sent the drone up, I noticed that in the distance you could see foothills leading to mountains. What mountain range is that?
Where Ground Zero's at, we're basically at the foot of the Ouachita Mountains.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you go just a few miles north, you'll start getting into the hills.
Got it. So do you think there's a correlation between the activity in Ground Zero in relation to the mountain ranges? Do you think that's an area they transit through, or do you think that that's an area that they usually stay year round?
For me, course, I live here in the area, and where I live at is one of the places where they will travel through. So, and to me, I believe what they're actually doing is making a counterclockwise rotation through an area that they're constantly moving through. You know, it's and I've never been able to pinpoint the exact time whenever they're going to be traveling through until they're going to come back through again. But where I live at is in between two rivers, and I'm thinking it's probably 7 or 8 miles north to south, and 5 or 6 miles east to west. So I mean, if you take in that amount of land, that's a pretty good sized area.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's not all me that helped me put this, I guess, theory together. It's from other people that I know along the way who've had other encounters. And it's along from where I live, from ground zero to my house, it's not that many miles apart. And from the place where it is in town to where there have been a couple of sightings in town, to where they go east, there was a man, I think around 2011. He something was messing with his dogs, and he went out the next day. I know in Alaska you get snow all the time, but for us it's kind of rare. It was a year that we had 2 snows, so that's to give us an idea. And he went out the next day and he took pictures of Bigfoot tracks. His neighbor, not that many, just a few years ago, he had something out there messing with his dogs one night, and he could see the glowing red eyes out there in the tree line. Wow. Well, I used to be on a deer lease that's just a couple miles east of where those guys lived at, and I had a game camera picture. I had it out there for deer at that time, and sure enough, the camera goes off, and I had 2 or 3 deer there in front of my camera, but back behind them, I had a picture of these big red glowing eyes. And that right there just fits right in with what I believe they're doing, because they're making their way from ground zero. They're coming to a little bit west and going south. And then they go east. When they go east, they have a river to spend time going up and down that river and getting whatever they're wanting or needing in that area, in that watershed.
Let's go back to Matt Slater in Quincy, Washington.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe they're following sort of like a more of a close, not like a migratory path, but it's like a neighborhood thing for them.
Yeah.
That's their area. Maybe they're either following deer around or just sort of kind of spreading their resource utilization, you know, just moving different aspects of the area, different resources here, different there, and just sort of following this trail through that whole zone, and then maybe back up into the mountains for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting. I've had researchers from an entirely different state, not even close to here, has told me they've observed similar patterns where they're at. So this is, I don't know if I'm letting too much information go or not, but anyway, this is what I have observed in the area. And the highway that's north of ground zero there, I found some tree manipulations and things like that on the other side of the highway. And it seems to be a slightly different design with what they've done. Instead of it looking exactly like it does in around the ground zero area, you've got some sticks that have been broken off to a precise length and stuck up in underneath some other things. And it's kind of like it's a different Bigfoot that's doing that. So to me, that's really interesting. I know William, he's observed some of the similar things in the Falk area. You know, where you can kind of tell which Bigfoot you're following by the design of the tree structure. You know, It seems like they have their own ID with them.
Yeah, it's a signature.
Yeah.
That they do.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I've never seen any tree structures, but what I've seen on your shows down there in Ground Zero and all that kind of stuff, which I thought were super fascinating. And the idea that they could be territory markers like that, or what do we, the last podcast we talked about, maybe they'll run a deer into it and it'll trip and break its leg or something, and they got him, or something. But
Yeah.
I thought it was just fascinating. That's one of the things I've always wanted to look into and take more pictures of if we had that, was tree manipulations. And
Yeah. We have found ambush area. We found what we really believed was an ambush spot down there, closer to Smith Park. You know, the dead end road down there, Daniel.
Yeah.
There's a spot out there where you could tell the trees. It was 3 different small trees that had been brought in from different directions to kind of make a spot where one could crouch down and wait on a deer to come by, or maybe one of them could herd it towards them, and yeah, they could grab them by the leg and swat them up against a tree, and there you go.
That's it.
Yeah, it's we found that out there. I found that out here in the Ground Zero area as well. I found some spots like that. It'd be like just a great ambush spot because they would blend in so well. And
one of the things I wanted to ask you that I asked William this question too, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. One thing I know is every time I hang around with you guys, I run into a snake. And that research area, Ground Zero, is infested with snakes, venomous snakes, killer snakes. So, and I've heard this on other podcasts where they talk about Sasquatch and snakes. Do you think that Sasquatch is immune to snake venom?
They very well could be. I mean, it's I remember I used to watch the Swamp Doggers, and there was a guy on there called Shelby Stanga, and the guy would get bit by cottonmouths, and it would make him sick or mad, but it never would do any serious damage to him. Somehow he had an immunity to them. So I'm kind of wondering, if it might be the same thing with them, if that's the case. I mean, if you're out there all the time, you'll get, sooner or later you'll get acclimated to your area. So.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, what has been your experience with gifting in your research areas?
The gifting is really interesting. To me, it's really interesting with the gifting. For a long time, we would put out the treats for the Bigfoot, and we never really got anything in return. It's a lot of times things would simply disappear. I remember finding a crystal up in the mountains one time and brought it down there and put it on the stump, put the rest of the rocks on the stump, and the crystal disappeared, which was a pretty good sized crystal, pretty nice one. And it disappeared, and we've never seen it again. But at the same time, I remember I would put golf balls out here on my place just as a curiosity to see what would happen, and the golf balls would disappear. And probably the first time that it really sticks out in my mind that I got something in return was there was a deer that got killed on the highway. So I went and I took the deer and I put it on the power line, which is I hunt. So anytime I hunt and I harvest, well, what I don't use, I put it in this one particular spot on the power line. And with that deer that had been killed on the highway, I put it down there. And I remember I set a camera up by it thinking, well, maybe I'll catch one making a mistake and I'll get this 15-second video. I had like 550 videos of the sky because my camera got adjusted for me. So something had moved my camera. And nothing messed with the deer, not even the buzzards or crows or anything. Nothing messed with the deer for the first week. But somewhere around day 9 or something like that, the deer got moved. And the deer was pretty much cleaned up. And what I had noticed was one of the golf balls that had disappeared up here off the tree line around the house was left within 5 or 6 feet of where the deer was. And I thought, that's really interesting right there. That a golf ball would be given back where I had left the deer.
Wow. Matt Slater.
Yeah, that's something. You know, that there's an intelligence working there.
Yeah.
And they know what's going on. You know, they turn your camera up. And he's probably watched you hang it from the tree, and he's like, no. No. But yeah, that's pretty amazing. You know, it's like, what's the distance from where the golf ball was picked up to where you retrieved it?
It was well over a quarter of a mile or
Wow.
more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the other time that I had something left for me was what we call the candy store. And we hadn't been out there in a while. And I just gone out there to just kind of look around one day. And where the candy store was at, I had a deer horn left at the candy store.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I've still got those horns. I need to show them to you sometime. William has pictures of the horns. And it really looks like one of them was actually broke off the head. Instead, not just a shed. It looked like it.
Oh, right.
But that's.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephen. I apologize.
No. But that right there, what I was going to say is I also found out there was part of the deer's backbone and the back legs. In the back legs, there was no hide left on it, and the back legs had been broken, not cut off. They've been broken.
Mm.
So, you tell me what else can break the deer's legs.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
That's good eats right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everyone thought this was a good show. I want to thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah.
I appreciate meeting you there, Mr. Hill.
Oh yeah, I've enjoyed it, guys. This is fun. I always enjoy meeting people.
Yeah, and again, you and William are generals. I consider generals, and you're great mentors to other researchers as well, and you've been so open and mentoring me in the field, and I've just had a great experience with you guys, minus the snake encounters.
Yeah.
But and that's another thing, you know, for researchers, not only you guys, but other researchers around the country who are willing to venture into these places that are snake infested or there are other predatory animals there. You know, that takes a lot of dedication. So last question for me, Stephen. Do you think there are other cryptids in Ground Zero?
Oh, we know for sure that there are. It's we know there's a dog man out there. I think there's actually more than one. So it's but somehow they coexist, or they have some type of relationship. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they have some type of relationship.
Wow.
So it's we've got the dogman picture where William and I were together, but there's also game camera footage of something really interesting. It kind of looks like a dogman to me, and I don't know if William's ever showed you that or not, but
he has, and I will say this: prior to hanging out with you guys, I wasn't really sure about the dogman phenomenon, but after having been to Ground Zero with you guys and heard the stories, seen the research that you two have conducted, I have no doubt in my mind that cryptid now exists.
Yeah. That's don't get me wrong. I didn't want it to be real. I really didn't. But I mean, whenever it's there and you've got pictures, there's proof of it. you also have the trackway of it. I mean, it's you can't deny it after you've seen it. So.
Matt and Paul, any questions about Dogman?
Oh, man, as you know, I've heard a lot of the stories and stuff from the different shows. It's quite a lot more violent and quite a lot more dangerous. And for you guys to be out there in the woods with pictures and videos of this thing, my hat's off. I wouldn't want to be out there and run into one of those things. No way. So, there was a story that I heard on a podcast where I think the guy said he was fishing game or something like that. He shot one square in the chest and didn't even phase it.
Yeah.
So there's no way. There's no way I want to ever run into one of those.
Yeah. 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 It's I don't know. It makes you think. I mean, a lot of times when I get out there, I don't know. I guess somehow I block that stuff out of my mind, and I'm just trying to pay attention to what's going on around me. But it's
definitely.
All I got in Anchorage, Alaska. Any closing thoughts or questions from you?
Well, I thought, like I said, this would have been a good show. Like a dog man. Well, I tell you, these things, they could get you. These Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever. Research, always glad to go with people that can hear and see better than you. You know what I mean? That way, your back is covered, and if you have a good crew, you always know you're safe. So that's a good way to do it. But thank you.
Oh yeah, I appreciate y'all having me.
Gentlemen, it has been a great show. We definitely have to do a part 2 because there's so much to talk about with so many great experiences that you have, Stephen. We would like to say a special hello to some of our partners that are at the Nebraska Bigfoot Conference now as we speak. In fact, Stephen, you were there last year, weren't you?
Yes. I was. I got to speak there. I got to share the stage with William. So
that's right. I watched it. It was awesome. So our research partners in this, Duke Sullivan from World Bigfoot Central, World Bigfoot Radio, and Robin Haynes. We send a special hello out to you too, and hope you're having a great time. So, Matt Slater, any closing thoughts or questions?
Not from me. Just thank you so much for being on the stream tonight, Mr. Hill. It's been an honor to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Sure.
So for myself, Daniel Becker in Anchorage, Alaska. For my partners, Matt Slater in Quincy, Washington, Paul Ayotte in Anchorage, Alaska, and Stephen Hill down in the great state of Arkansas. Thank you for joining us. And we'll definitely have to do a part 2 with Stephen Hill. Fantastic researcher, fantastic guy. We'll see you next time.